All right, I'd like to call us to order. It's 6:10. 6:12. Thanks for being patient with us while we dealt with our children to get here. So let's do a roll call.
Chair Riggs.
Here.
Vice Chair Alchek.
Right there.
Oh, there you are.
Commissioner Lawing.
Here.
Commissioner Rupavar.
Present.
Commissioner Suma.
Present.
Commissioner Templeton.
Present.
Commissioner Watt-Fogel. Everyone is present. Thank you.
All right, so I think we won't deal with it. We have one comment card from oral communication from an item not on the agenda from Jeb Eddy.
First of all, many thanks for all the hours you all put in. My wife and I have lived here for 52 years, and I want to help you take cars off the road. And I'm completely serious that electric bicycles are something of a frontier that can help do that. My wife and I have been married, I say, for 52 years, and we have identical bicycles like this. They're made in Israel. They have terrific features. We can ride together for the first time in 52 years. An earlier version that I had got Steve Jobs to ride. So I've been at it for almost 20 years. I have made an offer to Stanford University to donate an identical bicycle. I have nothing to do with I'm not a salesperson. I have no beneficial interest in any electric vehicle company. I do have 4 grandsons. And I may be the only, well, let's see, you might be grandparents also. We got to do a lot, and soon. And taking cars off the road with the revised GUP that Stanford is going to have to deal with in some form, if they had thousands of these things commuting to campus, we'd be a lot better off. So I'm going to invite any of you who is interested, the new head of the transportation department, for a ride. Jim Keene and I met on the downstairs parking lot on the basement, and he went zooming up the whole parking lot and out into the street, and he came back with a big smile on his face, because this is a legitimate form of transportation, and you're going to have to deal with some of the interesting problems like intersections and conflicts and some new rules about behavior. But it's a really neat opportunity. Thank you for this little start, and I will hope to see all of you at some point in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeb. Come back anytime. Appreciate it. So with that said, I think that's the end of our public comments. Planning Director Light, would you have any additions, deletions? And
Chair,
I believe you
Chair,
have some reports.
I'd like to comment on that, but if you have any changes, I just had a comment on the changes before he gives his report. I just want to ask if we think this is in the right order, because it's a very long agenda. If it gets really late and we have to continue something, do we know that we want to continue the last item? Because now would be the time to do an adjustment. I don't know that there is, but if we come up with a lot of ideas and a lot of debate, we're going to be here a long time. So.
Did anybody else feel that the agenda needs to be shuffled? I think I'm content with the agreement, and I think we have a commissioner that wants to recuse herself from one of the items, so I think it's convenient this way.
Okay, good.
Thanks for saying that. Okay, Director Lade.
Yeah, so just not much to report since your last commission meeting, but I will note that we are looking forward to coming before the Planning Commission toward the end of the year here in December with some initial findings on our inclusionary housing study that has been prepared. We don't anticipate coming with an ordinance in December. We want to hear the Commission's feedback in response to the report, and then we would probably return in early next year with an ordinance that we would like to advance on to City Council. You also had a discussion a meeting or so ago regarding the non-compliant building and or uses of a building on, I think it was Olive. We expect that that's going to come back at the end of the year or the first part of January. So other than that, no further updates.
Yeah, and I'll just riff off you in that we, in the pre-meeting, was discussed that we don't have, we actually don't have any agenda items for the January 8th meeting that we pulled you all on. We did have quorum, but in the interest that since we don't have any meetings, that meeting will be canceled. Our first meeting in the new year will be on the 30th. All right, so I guess we should move on to our study session. This evening, if you remember, one of the commission's goals this year was to educate ourselves as well as our community on what's happening in the built environment, what's happening in transportation that we need to be aware of. Earlier in the year, we had an individual that has some interesting transportation solutions in the parking arena that he talked to us about, and we've been trying to get two companies to come in and talk to us about this new idea of co-living, co-housing. So tonight we have Star City and Bungalow here to talk to us about this idea of co-living units. Without further ado, I think we we're going to structure this. I think we have a presentation from both of these innovators, and then we'll open it up to comments from the public. I don't have any right now, but if there are any members of the public that will want to comment, and then we'll have, if there's any dialogue or questions from the commission, we'll do that after. So without further ado, John? Oh, okay. And I think we have one disclosure from the dais.
Yeah, I just need to disclose that I did recently take a job with Bungalow, so I'm not recusing myself, but I am disclosing that fact.
Commissioners, thank you for your time. I don't have quite the theatrical performance of an electric bicycle ride-in, but I did decide to bring my parents out as pawns. I grew up in Palo Alto, actually, in the 1980s. And was born and raised here. And my folks actually ran a little experiment on the family, which was that they had Stanford students live with us. And this was a super impactful experience for me as a kid because the students got a free place or cheap place to live. We had inexpensive childcare for us. And my brother and sister and I had Stanford engineering students help us win every science fair project. But in reality, once I got to adult life, I noticed that the cost of living had sort of spiraled out of control for a lot of my friends and people in the industry. And we built this company, Star City, with the mission to make cities accessible to everyone. Today, there's a massive problem with median rent, as you guys all know, is well above where real incomes are for the middle class. And so we decided to start the company by talking to 750 people between the ages of 20 to 50 who made $40,000 to $100,000 a year who had full-time jobs. And we asked them, first, we'll give you $5, come talk to us. What are you currently doing? You're commuting an hour. You're fitting 4 people to a 2-bedroom. You're paying 60% of your income towards rent. The overwhelming majority of them were ready for something new. And so in early 2016, we set out to build our first prototype in Soma, San Francisco. It was a conversion of an old garage. We turned it into 6 bedrooms, and 1,000 people applied to move in. So that we really knew that we were onto something. So as I mentioned, our mission is to make cities accessible to everyone. We're hyper-focused on the middle class. People who are making that $50,000 to $120,000 a year right now, and I think it's a similar dynamic in Palo Alto. We operate in multiple cities up and down the West Coast. We were founded in 2016. We have 350 units live. We have 3,000 units under development, and we have 55 employees. The median renter age for us is 36, average salary is $70K, and we're actually achieving rental income less than 30% in most cases. As you may think to yourself, oh, is this tech millennial dorms? Well, the answer is no. We actually serve multiple constituents across 10 different industries. We have your starter, who's 20 to 30 years old, first moving out of college or grad school. We have your restarter, who's 30 to 50 years old, who may have gotten a divorce or got out of a relationship and they want to move back and live with other people. And so what we're finding is that this is actually working for a vast population that we wouldn't have otherwise thought. As I mentioned, this is not just for tech, right? This is for city government, for service industry, for retired folks. And we're excited to see all the different use cases that people are utilizing to build form in. So I'll introduce you to Eli Sokol, who's our development team, to talk a little bit about the design of what we're actually building.
Thank you. So just starting with an image here of one of our first properties in the Mission District in San Francisco, I think one of the kind of special, the special sauce of this type of format is really generously sized communal spaces that serve wide amount of people, kitchens, living rooms where people can meet serendipitously, interact, host events, get together in a living format that's just inherently more social than traditional multifamily projects. So I wanted to show you kind of a typical floor plan so you can understand conceptually how these spaces work. What's shaded in green are private bedroom suites. This is taken from a project in San Francisco, which is zoned or entitled as a group housing project. What's shaded in yellow is a communal space for kitchen, living room, and dining area. And so the benefit of having a centralized space for those residents is, again, having that critical mass of activity. It's certainly a more efficient floor plate, which in turn allows us to be able to rent rooms at a lower rate than we otherwise would be able to. So in Star City, the basic premise is that you are renting a private, fully furnished bedroom suite on a term of 3, 6, or 12 months. They're looked to be priced at a discount to market rate studios and one-bed apartments, so there's an inherent value proposition there for middle-income folks who normally couldn't afford an apartment in the city. As we mentioned, every typical residential floor includes communal living areas, which would have a kitchen, dining, and lounge space. They may also include laundry facilities and other broader building-wide amenities in a larger scale format. So I think an interesting example to present to you today is our largest project, which is in downtown San Jose. So in San Jose, we recently entitled a project for 803 bedrooms, which, wow, that sounds enormous. How do we do that? Why'd they allow that to happen? So this is a project that was previously entitled for 300 multifamily units. We came across the opportunity to do a project here where we could deliver an unprecedented amount of middle-income housing to San Jose, units that are offered affordable by design below 110 AMI. And the city was really taken with the idea of delivering that much middle-income housing because, as we know, with construction costs where they are, folks simply can't deliver multifamily projects or condo projects at an affordable level. And so we worked with the city of San Jose to actually craft the first co-living zoning code in the country. And I'll get into the detail of what that includes. Just real quick, here's a typical residential floor plan. You're seeing kind of an evolution of what I showed in an earlier slide, where now there's upwards of 45 to 50 beds per floor. And we've honed in on kind of the ideal ratio of how many beds should be served by a kitchen or a living room or a dining room, and finding a way to have all these spaces be effective, not overcrowded, and impersonal, so that there's a large chef-style kitchen for big group gatherings, and there's a more intimate, tucked-away kitchen if a family wants to have a quiet, more private meal. Just some renderings of that project. This is a communal rooftop terrace available to the whole building, and a ground level shot showing that we're going to be looking to put some neighborhood retail that serves not just our residents, but the neighborhood at large. So to the meat and potatoes, this is taken straight from the San Jose zoning ordinance specifically for co-living. So the basic criteria is as follows, that unlike traditional multifamily, every bedroom here counts as a legal sleeping unit, regardless of whether it includes a kitchen or bathroom within the unit itself. They're accessed off a common hallway. They must be at least 100 square feet and up to 150 square feet to serve 2 occupants. Each bedroom shall not serve more than 2 occupants, and a bedroom may contain kitchen facilities, but that is not a requirement. Other requirements are that every kitchen facility must serve at least 6 bedrooms. That really gets to the heart of what makes co-living different from other residential uses, and that there is a critical mass of users for those common facilities. And secondly, those common facilities must be of an adequate size to serve the private bedrooms that are on that floor. So in this case, a co-living community shall provide a minimum of 20 square feet of common space for every private bedroom. Bedrooms must have dedicated storage space, and parking requirements are lower than traditional multifamily, which encourages, of course, greater walkability and access to public transit.
We have another exciting project, which I'll get through quickly because I want to let the other team present. But I mentioned that our mission is to make cities accessible to everyone. Star City Minna is what the future of what we're trying to build looks like. 54% of this building, which is 16 stories, will be priced at AMI 50%, 80%, and 110%. That means that somebody on minimum wage can now afford to live in the heart of the city in a Class A product. That's something that is sort of fully realizes what the original vision of the company was, which is to make anybody be able to walk in and get access to the best places of opportunity. This is a little bit more of a tight, dense floor plan, and like I mentioned, the quality and fit and finish here will be on level of luxury product. So we thought we'd also talk a little bit about the barriers that we're facing today. You know, in many cases, there's not really a distinct zoning for co-living, and so that was where San Jose really started to shine, and we're talking to cities like Los Angeles and Seattle and Chicago about similar type of zoning changes. Sometimes dwelling units also require a kitchen and a bathroom, but we're often finding that people aren't using those as much as you would think when they're paying a lot of money for that. So why do we require that that actually be built in the individual space? In addition to that, Aaron Peskin just introduced legislation in San Francisco that requires you to have a minimum of 12-month lease. We think that that's actually detrimental to folks like nurses, interns, teachers who are substitutes. And so the 3 and 6 month leases are actually really important to this category of housing. And so we're starting to see inflexibility in those cases. Do you want to talk about the others?
Sure. So parking requirements, one of the broader trends we're seeing not just in co-living but across all urban living is that if you build housing close to jobs, close to transit, and design buildings that are human scale, people are going to get out of their cars and walk more. So we advocated for a lower parking requirement in San Jose, and we got it, but that's not the same case in other cities. And then finally, city fees, this is a bit nitty-gritty, but typically are based on a unit count, not on square footage, and obviously because we're a denser product, we're unit rich, even if the square footage is equal to a multifamily project, the fees end up being quite punitive, so moving to a square footage-based system would be more equitable.
And I'll just close with, look, we understand the scale of Palo Alto. We don't intend on coming to, back home here and building giant 800-unit buildings. Majority of our early projects and a lot of projects we do today are adaptive reuse to commercial office, hotel, or existing residential, and those work really well. And so we always try to go to the neighborhoods, talk to planning commissioners, supervisors, community groups about what they need in advance of actually building. And so I think today we're just really excited to present to you, and I think with that, we'll say thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and stick around for a little while because we may have questions afterwards, but I think we want to hear from our other team here, and it's actually so good. We have a community of people that are thinking innovatively, so we'll hear from the team from Bungalow.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. My name's Alex. I'm the Bay Area General Manager, and you'll also be hearing from our Director of Field Operations, Brian Connolly. So Bungalow was founded based on the concepts of community and accessibility. Accessibility being that we believe finding a home should be accessible to everyone. Additionally, Bungalow wants to provide the opportunity for a home with roommates you love, and so you can feel at home in any city you're in. So the Bay Area knows better than anyone the effects of the housing crisis on your friends, on your neighbors, on your family. And pair that with the growing epidemic of loneliness, and you have the environment that we're currently living in, where we're seeing rent growth decoupling from income growth, as well as the growing sentiment that more and more people are feeling lonely. So Bungalow is seeing that people are moving to cities and housing is feeling unattainable, varied, and complex, and lonely. So how Bungalow is looking to solve that problem is by focusing on 3 primary aspects. The first being that we are looking to optimize underutilized housing supply. So what we're seeing as underutilized housing supply are these 4, 5, 6 bedroom larger homes in single unit family homes that are just going unrented, both because families are just traditionally not those size anymore, and then additionally those homes are pretty expensive for current family structures. So Bungalow is able to take those homes and rent out those rooms to professionals within our network. The professionals in our network are, what we like to say, looking for more than just a room. So the amenities we provide within Bungalow is we're offering beautifully furnished homes in great locations, so we use a professional interior designer. We're also providing an opportunity to match with roommates. So these roommates go through a meet and greet process where they're essentially selecting who they want to live with based off lifestyle preferences and interest. So when we introduce someone during meet and greet, these roommates have the opportunity to say no, they don't think it's going to be a good fit. If someone doesn't appear to be a good fit, then we take that potential resident and try to find a better fit for them. So we're really focused on creating a community that acts as a household. And then additionally, we're providing community outside the house as well with multiple events and networking opportunities. So along with that, we're offering a range of pricing, which I'll get into a little bit later, but this allows us to find a home for multiple needs. And then additionally, we're providing a technology-enabled renting process because people are working more than ever. They need convenience, they need ease, and so people are able to rent with Bungalow through their phone, through their computer, whatever device works best for them. Additionally, we are focusing on the homeowner value. We can't solve the housing crisis without including the homeowners in the solution. So by offering homeowners value and creating more opportunities for people to join Bungalow, we're increasing our supply opportunities. So we do this by providing dedicated account management, 24/7 support, regular upkeep of the home through cleaning and annual inspections, and essentially homeowners are seeing a lot of value in that and partnering with us. So Bungalow's focus is to look at the problem and find solutions around convenience, community, and accessibility. So with residents, what that looks like is being able to offer a portfolio of homes within the Bungalow network so we can find a home that meets their price range, that meets their amenities, that meets their needs. Additionally, we're providing a roommate selection process. So this essentially allows people to go through a process with lifestyle preferences and really find people that they connect with. Additionally, we're providing a pre-built community where they can build organic connections because of shared interests. We have hobby-based activities that we're providing to people, as well as networking and volunteer opportunities. Additionally, on the homeowner side, what we're doing is we're able to help them rent out those hard-to-lease properties because the homes are just not moving on the market. Additionally, one of the other areas that has been successful is homeowners that have essentially settled on the concept that the only way they're going to rent this place is they need to sell the property. They've been able to partner with Bungalow and keep that investment opportunity for themselves and essentially not lose out the investment opportunity that they originally hoped for. Additionally, we are able to, by using the existing supply, we're able to retain the look and feel of the neighborhood. So by partnering with the homeowners and by getting to know the neighbors, we are essentially bringing the Bungalow platform into what is already existing within the neighborhood and fitting seamlessly within that. So another great reason that using existing supply helps bring on housing is we're able to move really fast and really quickly, essentially able to bring hundreds of living opportunities to hundreds of living opportunities to people per year. So just within the last year, we've brought 80 homes across the San Francisco, East Bay, Peninsula, and South Bay. And additionally, homeowners are becoming repeated customers. So whether they already have an investment, or whether they already have a portfolio, or they're looking to invest in new properties, they're coming back to Bungalow when they have a new home that they would like to bring onto the market, and thus we're able to rent those out to more working professionals. So another great aspect of using existing supply is we're able to offer a wide range of pricing. So all rooms are not created equal, and within a 5-bedroom house, you might have a smaller room, maybe it has a small closet, and within that same house, you'll see a master bedroom, maybe with a double vanity, and maybe a jacuzzi and a shower. And within that same home, we have a beautifully furnished living room, we have a kitchen with amazing amenities, and maybe a large backyard. So regardless of your price point, you don't have to compromise on the other amenities that can be offered to you in a home. We're able to find a need that fits everyone. Additionally, when it comes to Palo Alto specifically, we have an average price range of $1,500 for our bedrooms, and studios in Palo Alto and 1-bedrooms, as you guys know, run upwards of $2,500, $3,300. So it's really an accessible and competitive option for people looking to stay within Palo Alto around where they're working. And then a little bit more about the demographics of our residents. So our residents are choosing to live with bungalow long-term, and they're primarily choosing to live with bungalow out of convenience and location. So essentially, they're moving closer to work. On average, our residents are renting 12 months and then have the option to renew year over year, and they're renewing about 70% of the time, so people are staying with bungalow. Additionally, when it comes to the top employers within the area, Stanford University is actually one of our current top employers of our bungalow residents, which is really great. And then we have some tech companies, as I'm sure you can imagine, within the area. We see quite a bit of that. Residents also are usually within the mid-20s to mid-30s. However, we do have a large range of ages within our residents. We have someone in their 50s living with someone in their 20s, and they have a really great cohesive bond because they have similar living preferences. They have the similar concept of what it means to be a good roommate. So we're able to pair these type of people and create that experience that they might not have had the opportunity to meet someone like that because people are not looking within a box when they're trying to find people to live with. And then lastly, we're providing opportunities to create community outside the home. So that's through our community events, as well as we have multiple community events per month, and those are hobby-based activities, networking opportunities, and volunteer opportunities to provide people with a chance to bond with people over similar interests. So we're providing community to people from the minute they sign with Bungalow, both inside the home and outside the home. And so I just want to thank you so much for having us here today. And then if you have any questions, we'd love to take them.
Right, so we're going to hold, if we could just hold our questions, I have to make sure there's no public comment? No cards? Okay. All right, seeing there's no public comment, questions from the commissioners? Comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Alchek.
Yeah, if the reps from Star City wouldn't mind coming back up, I'm curious, you said there was something in your slide, maybe you explained it, but I missed it. What did you mean by the unit density limits can be detrimental to the purpose-built
Sure.
model?
So from city to city, depending on what site you're looking at and what zoning district you're looking to build in, sometimes the cap and what you can build is FAR driven. Other times it's based on a density limit of units per lot area. And so just making sure that it's really based more on form-based code and on meeting the intended goals of providing the right amount of housing for that neighborhood, we think would be more of a progressive way to regulate that.
So like an FAR standard would be better than a unit standard?
Yeah, because
you're
the amount of
treating
space
the
that people
rooms as
need,
units.
yeah, the amount of space that people need now arguably is a lot less than when the planning code was written, in many cases decades ago. And so the idea is more just to go to an FAR base, so there's less density limits and
Yeah, I mean, a typical example is if you think of like an old Victorian triplex in San Francisco, those lots are actually zoned for even less than what's built on them today. They're saying, maybe it's 1 unit for every 1,000 feet of lot area, and clearly you can accommodate a much denser use there if the density limit wasn't so strict.
The Minna project that you showed us, is that entitled?
that's entitled, yeah.
I'm not familiar enough with San Jose's zoning code. I know. But I understand that San Francisco has like a micro unit distinction. So was it easier to work in San Francisco even though they didn't have, I'm assuming you didn't create the language for San Francisco as well, or did you?
No, so as much bad press as the San Francisco Planning Commission gets, there is a group housing designation within this multifamily designation. And so that allows for essentially unlimited density, no kitchen in the dwelling unit, 1/3 the open space, and yeah, go ahead.
That site is in a commercial district, so commercial districts in San Francisco don't have a density limit based for units, and group housing generally allows the purpose-built model where a bedroom unit can count as a legal unit even if it doesn't have a kitchen or bathroom within it.
70% of the land area in San Francisco, though, does not allow the density limits that we need.
Right.
And similarly, like a lot of towns up and down the peninsula, and Los Angeles as well, don't allow it either.
When you were sort of crafting that code language with them, was there were there parts of it that they were sensitive to that you didn't anticipate? I'm curious to know, like, what were some of the issues
I mean,
that were hard for you?
parking was the biggest one by far. San Joseans, is that it?
I think so.
San Joseites like their cars more than Los Angeles. So we did a pretty wide survey of, it was a couple thousand people in both markets, and people spend more time in their cars in San Jose than they do in Los Angeles.
So at the moment, co-living is only allowed in the downtown area, which I think you would agree, if there's ever a chance for the South Bay to have an urban walkable center, it's downtown San Jose, which is where our site is. And so we advocated for a lower parking ratio, referencing the fact that San Francisco just eliminated parking minimums altogether. Granted, it's a different city, we get that, but parking minimums aren't just there to meet demand, they also can shape demand.
So it does, in the ordinance slide that you had, I don't see parking, but I'm under the impression that San Jose has like a 0 parking requirement in their little downtown.
It's for co-living, it's a minimum of 0.25 for every bedroom. And with TDM measures, you can get it lower than that.
There's a certain point at which we were uncomfortable not including some level of parking, although we are going through a transportation revolution. Again, with the survey results we got, we didn't feel like we could go to 0 on an 800-unit building.
So the San Jose project is in progress?
So yeah, so we fully entitled, we own the site, we're getting our GMP contract with the contractor, capitalizing the project right now. Our expectation is to break ground on it next year.
Okay, so this, you may not feel comfortable sharing this, I'm just curious, when you are searching for partners, are you using the same partners on both projects? Is it difficult to find a partner that will
Yeah,
invest
happy
this
to
money?
share all the details. When we first started, we talked to 40 lenders and they laughed us out of their offices. It's changed significantly over the last 4 years. And the reason is that a lot of other players in the industry and us have started to build up a track record of showing that there's decent yields for these, above, in some cases, multifamily. And obviously there's the renter case around the cost of living and obviously the occupancy rates. And so once we've started to build up a track record in owning a few of these assets and running them, the capital markets has really come alive. We separately finance each project, but are now working on a programmatic joint venture to finance a lot of these, which we can't announce yet, but that will allow us to fund the next 10,000, 100,000 units.
Okay, last question before I let everybody else go. And this is for both of you guys. It's actually for both teams. When the other team was speaking, it made me think of it, but I'd love to know what your response as well, which is, if you're in the renter's game, a lot of the attention that management companies have to focus on is discriminatory, practices. So you guys didn't really talk a lot about roommate selection, but I'm curious to know how you guys navigate everything from sort of managing that as well as Section 8, the new Section 8 requirements, and then also for the other team. I'd love to know how you avoid those, challenges, considering that you have such a curated model. Yeah.
I'll answer it real quickly. We're a first come, first served basis. Once you pass a background check and a financial check, we do allow, when someone's approved, to have existing residents go through a vetting process once we've approved them, and that complies with fair housing, because we, as the owner and operator of the building, have approved that resident. It would be the same thing as a group of roommates saying yes or no to another potential roommate. But when a building's first opening and stabilizing, it's first come, first served. We don't curate at all.
Okay.
We're basically the same model as that, and in the sense that the roommates are able to choose, like once they're in the house, but like you said, like you mentioned, for the first person.
And then I guess I'll just ask this too, because it's a changing rule right now, right? And so how does the new legislation that is sort of eliminating the short-term lease affecting your business, or affecting your hopes for execution?
Look, I don't think it's going to make or break our business model. There's, a lot of people early on when co-living was becoming a new niche category signed short-term leases because they wanted to try it out and they didn't know what it was going to be like. But now we're seeing people sign up for much longer terms, and they view this as a launch pad to the next point in their life, right? And so residents will stay anywhere between a year to 3 years. We still firmly believe, and this is why we'll probably oppose the Peskin legislation, that there's a whole category of resident, like nurses and teachers and interns, that do need short-term housing. And it's not that they're transient in nature, but that's just the only amount of time that they can stay in housing. And if they have to sign a 12-year lease, it's extremely cost prohibitive. And then they end up living in an Airbnb or a godforsaken SRO, you know. So from our perspective, it's not going to make or break it, but we'll push back on any legislation that we don't think is fair.
Okay. I hope somebody else will ask
I have a
about,
9-month contract, so
about whether
I
there's
understand that. Commissioner Wolfogel and then Commissioner Templeton.
Great, thanks. Stick around, I've got a question for you. Appreciate the appreciate the presentation. Just started looking for my notes on this. Could you speak at all to yields in your model? Because I think something we're concerned about is what other uses that co-living financially competes with. You know, in our downtown district, principal uses for commercial buildings are tech office, which command pretty high rents. And so if we said, okay, this is a mixed-use district, we'll make some zoning changes to enable co-living in downtown Palo Alto, would you compete in that setting?
So all money is green. We have to perform at or as good as office, as good or better than office does. So we actually believe, and this is the secret, don't tell anyone this, but this is actually highest and best use in many cases. So the yields can outperform commercial office and residential. Typically, a developer is looking for a return on cost to cap rate spread. And this is going to get super technical, but it's 150 basis points. Let's just use that as a benchmark. In many cases, we're north of that by about 50 to 100 basis points. And so what that tells you is that we're solving the affordability component, but we're also able to get more yield, and that makes sense because we're allowing more people to live in the same envelope building, and we're actually reducing the cost of construction on a per square foot basis in many cases because we're not building as many kitchens. It's more sustainable, and obviously the finishes aren't as high-end as luxury.
I understand the argument relative to other types of apartments. I'm struggling a little bit relative to tech office, which is $10, $12 a foot rent.
Yep.
You know, they're often just renting a shell where all the improvements are TIs. You know, you're not worried about building kitchens and bathrooms in tech office, or not at the same scale. So I'm just sort of curious, you know, if we were to say, look, same building envelope, would this format work if it's competing against a $10 a foot commercial rent?
I think one of the things it depends on is the size of the floor plate. Co-living units are not as deep because they're not as large. So you could have a building that's as narrow as 45 feet, whereas office buildings could be as deep as 100, 120 feet, multifamily 65 feet. So there might be, office users, specifically tech, like big horizontal floor plates. They don't want to have people over 10 floors. They'd rather have everyone on one floor. And so is that the right format for us? Maybe, maybe not, but we can work with smaller, tighter floor plates that are generally not very effective for office.
And to answer your question about the rental rate per square foot, we're typically about, in a place like San Francisco, 10 to 20 bucks per square foot per month on the gross, and about 8 to 12 on the net of square footage. So it's arguably very similar. Now, the operating expenses are a little bit different, right? We're running at about a 30% OpEx margin, OpEx ratio, 60 to 70% NOI margin. So it's comparable, right? And we've competed with office developers on sites before, and we're in some cases able to pay $1 more than they are because we believe we can get a better yield. And our capital is typically coming from residential investors who might not be multi-strategy in nature, and so they're not actually worried about whether or not we would use the site for office or residential. Like, we wouldn't acquire and build a site if we weren't going to build it as residential.
Okay, now this is actually very helpful, and I think it points to some things that, maybe staff can take up with you at some time in the future, if and when they have bandwidth to, to address this issue, but that's helpful information. For the other team, for Alex and when I look at what you're doing, it's a little bit of a platform play relative to existing existing real estate. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, I mean, it's a two-sided marketplace in the sense of we're working with homeowners, and then we're aggregating and helping roommates find rooms.
So my question with that, you put up a slide that showed your per room averages and different cases. One of the things that we struggle with a little bit here is we want to make sure that we have adequate supply of family-oriented housing in the community. And if let's say that your platform is wildly successful, would you drive the rental price of, say, 3-bedroom properties up and make them less affordable for families? I mean, sort of look at how your pricing splits out, bedroom by bedroom, and is the unbundled product commanding a higher price and possibly driving rents up?
Yeah, so there's two sides to that. One is there's always going to be certain types of landlords and homeowners that are geared more towards families, so they're just not really interested in renting with us, and that's okay. There's another side of homeowners that see the value in what we're doing, and we're able to negotiate lower rates because of the value we're providing them, and thus our goal is not to drive up those prices because we're negotiating the lower rates to be able to keep rooms a more market rate level, so we can provide that level of accessibility to the people we're renting towards.
This is an area where I just want to be super cautious, as we go forward, because the last thing I'd want to do is to, we've just seen platforms often have unexpected consequences. And so I think it's an area where it's interesting, but we just have to be really cautious that we're getting the policy objectives that we're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why it's so important for us to partner with cities, because cities are very different and their objectives can be really different. So it's helpful for us to hear what specific cities are looking for so we can help tailor our needs to, again, fit in with the neighborhood and fit in with the community.
All right, Commissioner Templeton, and then Commissioner Olczyk, who's going to keep it extremely short.
Hi, thanks, Bungalow. Since you're up, I will ask you another unintended consequence that I've seen even in our neighborhoods, the way they're currently managed, is the parking. So when we have many adults living in a single-family home, we have a parking constraint. What are you guys thinking about as far as handling parking?
Yeah, so when it comes to parking, there's two aspects we're looking at. One is actually when we're acquiring new supply, we're considering how many parking spaces are available. It's important for us because people don't want to live there if they're not going to have somewhere to park either. Additionally, one of the top reasons people are moving into bungalows is access to their work location. So we see a lot of people walking to work, using public transit, biking, because that is one of the biggest value props of why they're moving to bungalow, especially the working professionals and all the companies that are down here. That's really why they're moving here.
Great, thank you. And then for Star City, I thought I saw on your diagram that some of the rooms share a bathroom. How does that work, and is that like a family-oriented plan, or what's going on there?
Yeah, so we often see a lot of couples, small families with kids, people with aging seniors, parents who they want to live next to them, or two friends apply together. And so what we do is we offer an even lower price point by creating a Jack and Jill setup. So that's in our 457 Minute project is all individual bedrooms and bathrooms, but the San Jose project, since it is a more of a family-oriented location, we wanted to provide that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that.
And just one point on that,
Sure.
We are testing family floors. So essentially, the cost of childcare in the Bay Area is like out of control, and so the idea that we've been playing with is allowing people to share, do nanny shares, have a play area for kids. We want to have that separate from the millennial tequila floor, if that occurs.
Yeah.
Or maybe not, I don't know.
That was my next question, actually, was I can imagine a situation or a scenario in which an entire floor might be desired by a group that already has some kind of cohesive identity, either an extended family or maybe a company that has a lot of new hires that may want to rent out a whole floor at a time. What does that mean? Like, what are your thoughts about that, if that would have an impact on how you select, or?
Yeah, so if we work with an enterprise and they decide to master lease a floor, that's totally fine. That falls within fair housing laws. They can utilize it however they see fit. And so if we're talking to universities and or public institutions, if they decide to do that and use it as they see fit, then that's their prerogative. If we were to designate a floor to family use, you can't technically police that. But you could indicate to folks, just a heads up, there's going to be toddlers running around and a baby changing station, and if that's not your vibe, then don't apply for that floor.
Would that change the nature of the background checks or anything like that?
No, not technically. So we always check for crimes of moral turpitude or violent crimes, and that's pretty much it. And we actually don't do a credit check. We just do a employee check to make sure you're actually hired at the place you say. And we think that credit checks are a little bit antiquated. And then once people get in, if they cause an issue, there's a whole set of rules and regulations. And if there's a series of processes that we utilize in order to ensure there's some safety within the home. And if somebody jeopardizes that safety, they can be evicted through normal procedures.
Okay. Thank you both for the presentations.
No problem.
Great. Commissioner Olczyk, please.
Yeah, super quick. No, I just, for the developers, right? I think this is incredibly innovative, and I'm wondering if, there's a way we can sort of provide the community even a greater sort of representation of this concept. And I'm happy to do this offline, but I'd love to know if there's a way for us to maybe offer you not offer you, but provide a parcel, for example, in our community that you could create a hypothetical project so that we could essentially demonstrate within our zoning code, if we set aside for a minute the limit on units and we operate within our FAR, what could be accomplished, and what, tweaks to, let's say, parking requirements or height requirements or FAR, how that would affect a given project and how many units that would put online, just so we could, I don't know, I think it would be like a book report, I think it would be interesting if we had an idea in this community of how your model would be affected by our current zoning. Sure. And what would have to change for that to pencil out. And so I'd be happy to sort of talk to you offline, but I think that could be really interesting and help enumerate a lot of.
You're looking at two deal junkies right here, so we're happy to get pencils out and start drawing some
Maybe
some
leave
ideas.
a card or something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you both, and thank you for just coming and talking to us about how your innovations are shaping communities around the Bay Area and California and the U.S. So we really appreciate the time. And it sounds like there's a lot of ideas percolating. Was there another comment? I'm sorry, Commissioner Suma.
One quick question for the Star City team. Do you know how, because you build your buildings and you're the developer and builder, do you know how your costs compare per square foot with affordable housing developers? Because for affordable housing, deed restricted, affordable housing available to a certain level of AMI, the biggest problem is the cost per door.
Yep.
So do you know how your model compares?
So right now we're building, average unit of housing in San Francisco costs about $1.1 million right now. We're delivering at about $400K. And we have, Minna should be around 300 to 350. So, and if you were to sort of compare that apples to apples, we're about a quarter of the, 25% cheaper than a new affordable housing project. And a lot of that comes down to the efficiencies that I mentioned around less kitchens, reduction in sort of all the higher end amenities and things like that, and better utilization of the floor plan. And so that's really the savings right now. We are in a cyclical, super high cost of construction time, but we're seeing a lot of the general contractors really digging in on innovative approaches on how to reduce overall costs, whether that being self-perform or ordering steel in advance or doing things like that, that will allow us to bring the cost down even further because they understand many of their workers, the subcontractors, are commuting in from Tracy or Sacramento. The carpenters unions are typically spread throughout California, and so they look at this as a potential place for them to actually live.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
All right. Thank you, Paul, again. We really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. And I'm sorry to be rushing things, but we do have a full agenda tonight. And I think that we've got a lot of ideas flowing here. So we look forward to keeping in touch with both teams. So, all right, so we're on to our next item, which is a quasi-judicial item. So I believe we do need to ask if there's any conflict of interest. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Also, the commissioners do need to disclose if they've had any contacts related to this item prior to the meeting.
All right, does anyone have anything to disclose? All right, no disclosures. So we have a presentation from staff, and we'll take public comment after, and then have our discussion. Sheldon.
Yes, thank you. Sheldon Ussing, contract planner, here to present this evening. This is for a tentative map for a condominium subdivision for 4115 El Camino Real. It's a previously approved architectural review project earlier in the year. It's a one-lot subdivision. It's about 0.36 acres. And the airspace condominium would be for 7 residential units and 2 commercial condominium and 2 office commercial spaces. So just a summary, it's there's a basement level with all of the with some of the parking and some mechanical parking, as well as there's some surface parking and garage parking at grade. It's a through lot with El Camino Real as a frontage, and then there's El Camino Way in the rear. Then there are 2 other floors above that. There's one of the units would be allocated for below market rate, and there's an agreement that would be associated with this map when it goes to the council. And there would be some typical off-site improvements associated with a map, including some curb and gutter, some lighting, as well as, because I mentioned that there's the through lot, we did want to have access, pedestrian access between the 2 streets, so there is a public access easement that's in place for this project. And there's some limitations on the hours of that. So essentially, the nighttime would be limited for access, but during the day it would be open. The project is consistent with the city's municipal code regarding subdivisions. And the project is subject to CEQA, but it's covered under the original adopted mitigated negative declaration. And the project is consistent with that and those findings. And therefore, we do recommend that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing and recommend approval of the proposed project to the City Council with the condition of approval. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right, I have no public comments, and I'm assuming we have no presentation from the applicant. No, okay. So with that said, maybe just go down the line. If anyone has any comments, or I think at this point I'll entertain a motion as well. Chair, Commissioner Lowing.
Appreciate the respect, though. That was good.
Touche.
Just a few quick ones. One is I think you did a heck of a good job on detailing the how consistent this is with the findings. Very helpful to have that laid out as well as it was. You're saying there's no zoning change here because it's consistent within the zones, correct?
That is correct.
Right. And then there's 3 heritage trees. Will they be remaining? We'll work around them and leave them there?
I need to consult the plans, but I know there's a large tree in the rear, and that's definitely to remain.
Packet page 14.
Now, you're also speaking to the street trees?
Yeah. Well, it says protected heritage trees,
Yeah.
sycamore and maidenhair along El Camino and Chinese elm on El Camino Way.
Right, those would remain.
Okay. And I just want to add that architecturally, I think this fits in there really well. I'm very familiar with the area, and I think it's a good fit. So that's all.
Commissioner Templeton.
Hi, thank you. I also appreciated the detailed nature of the report, so thank you. I was wondering if we have an idea of what height they're building to with the three stories. I couldn't quite figure it out, but I wondered if you might know. If you don't, that's okay.
So Sheldon, we'll go ahead and take a look at that. Just to remind the commission, what's before the planning commission right now is just the subdivision component of the application, and the building was reviewed through a process.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I'll stay on track then. So some of my other questions may not be relevant. I was going to ask if there's going to be green space available, like on the roof or something like that for the residents to enjoy, or is that out of scope as well, Jonathan?
Not on the roof. There's some balconies.
Balconies, okay. Great. Great. All right, well, then that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Wolfogle.
Great, thank you. I'm inclined to support it because of the findings. Just a question, what's the status? If we say go, will we see bulldozers out tomorrow?
No, because we'll have to go to the council for the map, and then they have to submit a final map and kind of go from there with building construction.
Okay, so there's still a few more obstacles to run through, but this is a good step.
Yes.
Process, maybe, instead of obstacles.
Process. Thank you for the correction. I apologize.
I'm going to keep us rolling. Commissioner Suma.
Yeah, thank you for the report, and it seemed very thorough in making the reverse findings. I'm inclined to support this also. In visiting the site, I will say the parking around there is really tight, so I think the construction logistics will be really key here to making it run smoothly. But I think the argument for the map is well laid out.
Commissioner Olczek.
Yeah, I'd like to, if only we could start construction after this vote. I'm sure we'd have a lot more built. No, in earnest here, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend that the City Council approve this proposed tentative condominium map based on the findings and subjects to the condition of approval in the report.
Do I have a second?
Second. Everybody.
Was that Commissioner Lowing got the second? Yeah. I have a comment from Commissioner Templeton.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, the reason I asked about the building height was to see if there was any space for another floor or if we could get any more housing on the site. I took a look through the zoning, and this is really the maximum number of units for the current zone. So that was just the only reason I was asking about that. Do you also feel this is as dense as we can be on this particular lot?
Yeah, I think at the time this was proposed, this is really the maximum that they could do.
Okay, thank you.
And since then, we've, Planning Commission's reviewed and the City Council's adopted the housing incentive program that would eliminate density restrictions and allow for other development potential.
Seeing no other comments, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, the motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commission. All right, so we are on to item 5, which is we have our transportation staff member here. Thank you. All right, so San Antonio Road and East Charleston intersection improvements, and I think that Transportation Director Cammy is joining us, and they will emphasize intersection-only tactical.
Thank you. Apologies. I tried to scarf down a sandwich in between my last meeting and this one, but I almost made it. I got halfway through.
I was riffing a little bit to get this done.
Thanks. So good evening. I'm Philip Cammy, Chief Transportation Official. Tonight, I'm actually not going to be doing the presentation. Rafael Rios will be doing the presentation. He and Ruchika have been working on this project for quite a while.
Thank you, Commissioners and Chairs. My name is Rafael Rios. I'm the Traffic Engineering Lead for the city. I'm here to introduce our traffic safety improvement project for the intersection of Charleston Road and San Antonio Road. This project was initiated as part of the city's traffic safety improvement project, which focuses on near-term spot improvements in various areas around the city. This project began based on constituents' requests for improvements, and the process involved 4 community meetings, with one of which was really targeted at the business community and held during the daytime, but is still open to the public. Before I get to the PowerPoint presentation, just wanted to add that staff is asking the Planning and Transportation Commission to review the concept alternatives and to provide a recommendation to the City Council to direct staff to move forward with a recommended alternative to complete the final design and to initiate the construction process. So with that, I'll briefly go through our PowerPoint presentation. So this project really had safety goals to start with, but really the 3 priority issues at this location were for pedestrian safety improvements, vehicular safety improvements, and then vehicular traffic operations, mainly addressing congestion issues that currently exist. Up here is an aerial image. It's rotated to the right, so north being to the right, which San Antonio is the street. On the right side of the street would be, right side of the screen would be the 101 ramps and kind of the Baylands. Charleston Road is the one going up and down, with the Best Buy Costco area to the bottom of the page, and Charleston and then Middlefield Road to the top side of the page. The Jewish Community Center would be in the top right corner in this image, just for orientation. So this project, going back to the city's 2017 traffic safety and operations report, this intersection had relatively higher number of reported collisions around compared to other intersections in the city. So the highest collision types were rear end and sideswipe collisions, and we try to address these in our recommended improvements. We really started off with 2 concept improvement ideas, and a third was a combination of the first 2. The first one, what I'm going to call idea A, was really to improve the pedestrian crosswalk improvements between the JCC and which currently I believe is 76 gas station. The crosswalk there is at a really unique angle, and there's 2 right turn lanes when you're coming off the freeway, and it creates a sightline concern, and also the diagonal nature of the crosswalk is longer than typical. Crossing San Antonio Road on the south side is also a very long crossing distance, so that requires extra signal time. The second improvement that we wanted to incorporate was addition of a second southbound left turn lane. During the peak periods, primarily the PM peak, that left turn pocket fills up and the queues back up sometimes all the way to the freeway, blocking the through lanes. Our concept idea C that we initially started with was just a combination of the 2, and through the community meeting process, we actually developed a 4th and recommended alternative that I'll get to. So what I'm showing here is our concept idea C, which is actually just a combination of A and B. We extend the corner of the southwest corner to create kind of a peninsula island, to really square up the pedestrian crossing across Charleston Road and to reduce the crossing distance across San Antonio Road. This early concept also included converting one of the right turn lanes to a buffered bike lane. We did some further analysis and found that this would potentially trigger vehicular impacts during the morning peak. What's also shown here is addition of a second southbound lane using the existing right-of-way, so there's no curb-to-curb widening, but it would just be median island modifications and taking up some unused space that's currently blocked off with just striping right in here. After the first two community meetings, we really heard from the community as well as several council members that were in attendance at these community meetings that vehicular operations was really important factor here, and we should either maintain or improve them. So what we did come up with is we brought back the second right turn lane and also added an overlapping right turn phase for that southbound right, which means it would have a green arrow at the same time as the eastbound left turn turning off of Charleston. That, in addition to the second left turn lane for the southbound movement, provided an improvement for both the AM and PM peak period, as well as the pedestrian and vehicular safety improvements that we were looking for. On the south side, where we currently have the entrance to the frontage road, that was also modified slightly based on feedback from the gas station as well as the business owners in that area. There's some large gas tankers that do turn from Charleston into that frontage road, so it would have to be designed to accommodate those truck turning movements. And we also came up with a net no loss in parking spaces. This shows a loss of about 2 parking spaces closer to the intersection, but we would modify the island further south to add those 2 spaces back. And that's it for my brief presentation. We originally had plans to take this if a recommendation is provided by the commission. We were targeting December 16th, but I believe that date may change. And following that, we hope to go into a final design process next year, and construction would follow. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Well, unless these are really questions, oh, okay. Do we have any public comments? Do we know? Okay. Do we? No. All right, then we'll go to questions. Okay, hold on. Sorry. You were not first. Is Commissioner Lowing, followed by Commissioner Alcheck, followed by Commissioner Tippleton.
Okay, thanks. I'll pick up on your unintended lead there, Chair Riggs.
Actually, if you don't mind, can I interrupt you, if you don't mind? My unintended giving you lots of authority tonight. I just got a tickle in my ear from Vice Chair Alcheck. I'm all over the map tonight, sorry. Suggestions, just to focus us, suggestions are appreciated. Ideas are appreciated from what we talked about, but I think from what you told us yesterday, the reminder that this is a part of the tactical street improvement program, something that we could do within the next 6 months to a year. So maybe I can just provide just some emphasis there, if that's not paraphrasing you all too much from yesterday.
Yeah. Sorry. So specifically, any comments that you wish to provide to this, we would happily share with council. This is a specific treatment in this intersection to target improvements, for the safety, and it's not in direct relation to any area plans or any other, bike boulevards or anything else like that. Yeah, if that helps.
Sorry, Commissioner Long, unless was there additional comments that you?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
All right, Commissioner Lowing, apologies.
Okay, I was just going to pick up on what your unintentional lead there, Chair Riggs, by saying that no, there's no public comment. I was going to congratulate you on involving the community in 3 different workshops multiple times, and I think the definition of your success is that no one is here, because you've been able to mediate all sides of the thing and come up with a recommendation there. So I'm quite serious about that. Just one data point on data, is you said that your data on collisions ran through December of 16. Is that because that's the most recent that's published?
So this project actually started in exactly 2 years, November 2017, and at the time that was the most recently available data. So we went back 5 years, the 5 most current years in 2017, and we wanted to be consistent with what we shared with through the community process throughout the whole project.
Yeah, stating the obvious, it would be better to know what's happened in the last 2 years, particularly with the increase in traffic, so.
If I can, we had to have some kind of cutoff for going out and having the public discussion. There was an accident there yesterday, I believe. We can't
But you have to remember that collisions are Bayesian. They're random. So to a certain degree, it's irrelevant without context.
Yeah, I was going to just mention that I heard on next door that there was another collision there, which I hope you guys didn't make happen, just to kind of give highlight to this. But that brings me to my other comment, which is that you say one of the unfortunate downsides is that you're not going to be changing the bike configuration. And that's obviously something that you're kind of willing to live with. There's a bike going by there every 3 minutes, so that's not 30 bikes every minute, but there's traffic there. So can you just speak to that so we can get a comfort level?
Yeah, there's considerable amount of work for the bicycle network that's happening adjacent to there. There's going to be an item going to City Council quite soon for the bicycle bridge over the 101 that is set to connect to the Bike Boulevards project that's adjacent to there. And so the hope is that, and currently that overpass is really not bike friendly, that freeway overpass. And so the hope is to not set one intersection as a bike treated area, but to have bicyclists use the bike facilities that are adjacent to that area. And potentially this doesn't prohibit this from potentially being modified if we determined that there was a feasible bike path in the future that could go through this intersection. This specific treatment is to address safety.
So you're saying you could still design that in at a later time, even after you make these changes?
It could, but it would more likely be a more holistic approach to that, where we wouldn't just look at this intersection, we're going to put a bike facility in, but it connects to nothing.
Maybe I can add. So if you look to the far right of your diagram here, where you see the dashed, what we call Class 2 bikeway, basically end straight into a curb. That is really not complete street design. Like we don't have a treatment really that works at that point. We're asking someone to ride in line with traffic and then become a Class 2 cyclist. So then we prioritize them here. So I actually brought this up in the pre-meeting because it's clearly an area of interest of mine as well. And the treatment in C would almost encourage not unsafe cycling. So to a certain degree, while everybody wants to talk about green lanes, it actually is, it's a less elegant solution given this location and the real need for a tactical solution to address pedestrian issues here. So hopefully I just clarified a little more about like what you're talking about there.
Yeah, essentially that's correct. I just want to further that by saying if it was to be considered in that specific intersection, it shouldn't be considered alone. It should be considered with the rest of the network that it connects to. So it shouldn't just end abruptly and force potential conflict.
Yeah, just to add, I think it was mentioned, this eventually evolved into alternative D, but if a bike facility was built north and south of this, nothing would be built to prohibit going back to this. This is mostly paint on this. So.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lang. That was great, rich questions. I have Commissioner Altek, Commissioner Templeton, and then Commissioner Rupavar.
Okay, I just want to start by saying that because I knew we had some, big hitters in traffic on this commission, I attempted at great length to become knowledgeable on this topic. And I spent quite a bit of time at this intersection, and I was there yesterday when this bus got hit. And I saw the whole thing unfold, which is kind of random. Okay, You were there? Oh.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. Were you there studying this item?
I wasn't studying it, but
I
I
was.
saw it and I turned around.
All right, let's keep it rolling, let's keep it rolling.
Anyways, here's what I'd like to say. I am not surprised that after you presented it to the residents or individuals who participated in your session, they did not appreciate sort of the elimination of the second right turn lane off of San Antonio. I suspect, I don't know, I don't understand that. It seems to me like your initial sort of approach of eliminating that lane was wise, and it was probably driven by standards in intersection design. And I would, let's see here, I'm looking at the recommend to City Council the preferred alternative. So if I were to support a motion tonight, I would support a motion that recommended that you revise idea D to eliminate the two right turns. In the process of sort of watching, I actually spent more than just one day watching, so I've been there a while in the last couple of days. And it seems to me like the farthest right lane indiscriminately continues to make right turns as long as there's an open slot. I think that actually is in line with the legal right. You can make a right as long as you come to a stop despite not having a green if you're in the far right lane. That doesn't apply to the second right lane, I think. That's my understanding, but I could be wrong. So the second right lane can't necessarily make a right at a red. It's not, it wasn't exactly clear to me because they still have another lane of traffic that's blocking their view. But it looked like the lane second in was essentially at a stop until it received a green light. And then the innermost lane was more freely moving, which created sort of an interesting dynamic in that space. In the current setup, I know that lane also goes straight, which would change here in either case. But to me, I wonder if it would, and I'm not talking about the introduction of a bike lane. I think that the elimination of that bike path there is a good idea. But it seems to me like it would be much more efficient and safe if there was a signal for turning right. So for example, if I would call it eastbound East Charlton traffic, when they're making a left onto San Antonio Road, if there was a dedicated right turn signal that allowed the lanes trying to make a right there to flow without stopping for pedestrians, if you will, because pedestrians were stopped. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? That may be in your plan already.
Yes, that is in the plan. I did look into the details. It's actually not outlined here. Was whether that, I mean, in a typical fashion, yes, when the eastbound left is turning, has a green arrow, you would have a green right arrow. But when the southbound gets a green light, that would just turn to a green ball, which means yield right. To right turns. What did come out of the community process but would trigger an operational impact was if you can have like a right red arrow when a pedestrian's going, and not the green ball, that would degrade the level of service though. Some other things we looked at was, I've seen it in other areas, but so I think you can make a right turn on red from the second lane, unless there's signs. But
I was going to clarify that as well. Yes, you can. Per
it doesn't look like a lot of people do, though.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah. So, but just on that, I have also seen regulatory signage that says right turn on red from right lane only, which could prohibit that. Which would prohibit that.
So there's probably some level of confusion there because it looks. I'm not suggesting. In my time there, I noticed that individuals who were going to make a right, not continue straight, were just sort of hanging up there and creating sort of like, I saw one guy get annoyed and dart into the farthest right lane, pull around. I saw that happen a number of times.
In some of my observations,
let's keep it rolling.
Okay, in some of my observations, that frequently happens when a car wants to go towards that frontage road today.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that is a significant improvement is the addition of the second left lane, because there was noticeable queuing, and when I was there in the morning time, for example, there was a noticeable queue that went almost all the way past the JCC, of people who were trying to get into the left, which created a problem for people coming out of the JCC who were trying to get into the left lane, and they blocked all this traffic. So to the extent that you can sort of lengthen those two left lanes, I think that will, vastly improve probably the level of service on this intersection. So I sort of, I guess I think it would be an improvement if it didn't have two right lanes, if it just had the one right lane. And then I would just want to add one more thing, which is I think there's a sort of a significant use by the JCC here, because they do a morning drop-off, right, for students. And that loop goes through the school and then comes out this drive aisle that you have sort of in faded gray. And I'm wondering if they provided input to, like, if they were invited to be a part of the conversation, and if you felt like they gave valuable input.
They were invited. This did come up. It's funny, they had an interesting discussion amongst patrons or users. I mean, one wanted improvements to the driveway to square it up, and others wanted it to be more of a ramp-like merge versus a right turn. And it was a good back and forth on that, and we could look into alternatives to do that, but it was definitely discussed amongst the.
So I'll just, I mean, I think, not to put you on the spot, but I sort of did reach out to the leadership of the JCC in an effort to just understand if they had a particular opinion about this. And I guess the very top of the organization isn't aware of the change. I think you'll find a partner there that's sort of interested in not only seeing this change. They suggested they were actually very interested, long overdue was the word they used, but they weren't aware that this discussion was taking place. And so it may be that the patrons and the users and even some residents there might be familiar with the project, but the sort of management staff, I think they would be delighted if they had an opportunity to engage.
So, yeah, 3 out of the 4 meetings were held there.
At the JCC?
At the JCC, and we definitely, we booked the rooms through the management.
Okay. No, I'm glad to hear that.
So,
I will refer this to the person that I spoke to, was unaware.
Sure.
But I think they're also excited that you're taking this on.
Yeah, their staff did actually provide feedback too. I mean, maybe not the top management staff, and they did like the double left turn lanes, because they said also a secondary problem was they can't even get into the left turn lane because it's backed up past the driveway.
Do you anticipate that any of these changes will, I guess, create an improved level of service in the direction going to 101, which seems to be, really strained in the morning?
Well, just in general, Alternative D does improve the level of service. The shortened crossing across San Antonio, if you can imagine, it's about, I think it was about 25% shorter. So the flashing hand when you press the walk button is about 34 seconds, and that could be reduced by about 25%. The overlap also gives more time to the southbound right, which in the morning in particularly drives some of the green time for the southbound movement. In the evening, it's driven by the left turn movement. So it could potentially save green time in others and reallocate that time to other movements of the intersection.
Okay, and then the last comment, are you or would you consider lengthening the track for the 2 left turns coming going north on San Antonio and turning left on East Charleston? Essentially, I think that there's some, that would in essence move cars off the tracks that are going towards 101 and sort of create more efficient. Does that make sense?
I think we in transportation would consider it. I know those are relatively new islands and planters for the city, but if...
I'm just saying because I noticed that they would you couldn't get into the left turn lanes for some of these people, and then they would immediately move in there, and then suddenly the traffic would like ramp up because there was all this space before the light, and so people sort of rushed towards the light to catch the light. And so these are just some of the things that I noticed while I was watching for like the hour that I was there.
Yeah, I definitely can consider it and see how.
That space is ample because you have 2 left lanes.
Yes,
but it was hard.
it's ample. There's a median there that would, I think it's about 8 years old that would have to be reconfigured, but it's
Okay. That's
concrete.
it. That's my comments. Thank you.
Very good.
I now hand
All
over
right.
to the
Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you. I just did a brief calculation, and I think I've traversed this intersection over 5,000 times. So I certainly have a lot of opinions. I will try and keep it under control as far as what I share with you tonight. I appreciate that you have shown this to members of the community multiple times, and that you've spoken with the gas station owners on the corner about how the different proposals might affect our business. That is a really popular spot to refuel. So first question is, are there also plans for the East Charleston part that you have on the top side of this that aren't reflected in this? Because as I recall, there's corridor improvements happening, is that right?
Yes, there is. This project is completely independent from the Charleston Rasadero project, but that Phase 3 project I know is going to have a full signal modification at Fabian, and I believe that it had bike lanes to this intersection, but I'm not 100%
Yeah, I
sure.
think so too. It would be interesting to see these two juxtaposed, even though they're being run independently, just to see how that goes. I've not only ridden this a lot in the car, I've also ridden it as a bicyclist, and it was terrifying. And I have driven past bicyclists, and it was terrifying. So I appreciate that, the points that you made about having a separate project to look into that. I think it's really important. There are people who want to bike this way, but we need to find a way to make it safe.
Sure, and what's shown here for Charleston Road are the existing conditions.
Right.
There isn't really any significant modification to the lane configurations, so it would be open to
There's not? Okay.
either, I mean, what's happening with the Charleston Rasadero or other bike connection improvements, it could accommodate any of those.
Okay, great. So then, in your collision report, it looked like those were all vehicular collisions. Was there any pedestrian or bike collisions that would be in addition to that, or?
There was one bicycle collision. I believe it was a southbound San Antonio sideswipe. There were no reported pedestrian collisions.
Okay.
in the Switters report. But we did get numerous complaints and requests, and it was repeated again in each of the community meetings. The community meetings were primarily members of the residents of the facilities at the JCC or to the north, just to the north of JCC, and also the JCC employees when they cross the street. Those were the primary concerns that we heard. So there were no reported ones, though.
Okay. Okay, so I would say regarding the comments about eliminating the second right turn lane from San Antonio onto Charleston, I would oppose that. It is a major point of congestion, and I would love to see us find ways to have longer periods of free-flowing right-turning traffic because everybody's coming right off the highway, and they're not quite ready to stop. And I think that's one of the scariest things is not just the number of vehicles, but the speeds that the vehicles might be, might be scary, that they don't have enough time to react and things like that. Is it possible to have that right turn lane where it just keeps going? I think you'd have to eliminate a lane on the other side of Charleston.
No, we wouldn't have to eliminate any lanes. It is incorporated into these alternatives to have a green arrow at the same time as the eastbound left, so the left's turning from Charleston going towards 101. It would have a green right arrow, and then
It would always be green?
No, only when that left turn is green also. And then
So that's my feedback. Sure. Is if in dream world, if it were possible to have only one from the bottom, I guess that's the east, going north, one lane. You can have the other lane take that whole right turn traffic nonstop. That might,
Are you talking about coming from Mountain View heading
yes,
towards?
which I know is out of scope. I'm just throwing it out there. You wanted feedback, so here you go. Yeah, I don't know if it would be possible. The other idea I had was that peninsula that you have jutting out from the corner where there's currently a gas station.
Yes.
That is so awkward. Even now, it's a little awkward, but that makes it more awkward. Have you thought about extending the barrier behind the parking all the way to that intersection and having an island instead of a peninsula so that it still shortens the crossing path? I'm not sure if I'm even making sense. Yes, yes. So where the parking spaces are, there's a green barrier. I was wondering if that could go all the way up to the crosswalk area and then have the ingress to the parking area where the peninsula is. Then that would make an island for the pedestrians.
Actually, I don't have, I don't know if you have, so that's actually what's existing conditions today.
Then how are we shortening the path across then?
So right now.
Oh, no, because there's not a place for pedestrians to wait there. That's my suggestion is if you could have the pedestrians wait there, then that's a loading zone for them and it shortens the time across.
Well, right.
Sorry, you're suggesting a refuge at that spot?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for finding the right words for me. Yeah. Okay, well, it sounds like other people have thought about that, so I'll leave it there. That's one way to shorten it, but it doesn't solve the
We would have to have two separate pedestrian phases because you are within the intersection. If you're giving this movement a green light, you have to have stop control for the pedestrian. So you would have one set of buttons and countdown timers for this crosswalk and then a second one for this.
Yes,
you would have to do
we
two.
currently do that on El Camino at Embarcadero, and it's kind of functional. It shortens that really long crossover, gives you a place to wait.
Is there, I know there's one at Page Mill, at Embarcadero, is there a separate pedestrian phase to get to the island? I don't think there is because there's a yield sign.
It's not signalized, so you're saying we'd have to do that here because of the left turns. I see.
Because once these cars have a green light to go that way, or these cars have a green light to go that way, then you have to stop the pedestrians.
Is that a concern? Or would that cost more? Or you're thinking of something I haven't thought about, so feel free to share.
I'm thinking it would actually increase the crossing time because you would have to have two separate crossings, and both of those would really only go with the eastbound Charleston movement. So you'd be extending the green time for this eastbound Charleston.
It's also not best practice to strand a pedestrian in a trafficked area. So basically, stranding a pedestrian in the middle of traffic is not best practice in terms of.
It's actually like not
substantially less safe.
Some of the concerns that we heard from people when we were out there, and I only went to one workshop at one of the community workshops, but some of the concerns that I heard from pedestrians there was how long it takes to get off of the street, in that it's a very large crossing there. And even if you're at that refuge, you don't feel like you're off the street yet.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I guess I'm concerned about the awkwardness of the ingress to the parking lot, however you want to address that.
So in this, I just want to show you real quick, in alternative C, the island extended out pretty much further, and we essentially intentionally created two receiving lanes and then a right turn to go in here. This was revised. We heard concerns about this operation, so it was in addition to accommodating the truck turning, we also made it wide enough to accommodate like a third receiving lane so that you wouldn't have, there was a concern of a rear end if somebody slows down to make a right turn, getting rear-ended, so it would have a third receiving lane. So it didn't make the crossing quite as short, but I think we still achieve a lot of the goals we were trying to get. And also address that concern that I think you're getting at about the ingress to this parking area.
Yes, thank you. I guess but you're still, from the right turn lane, going to send people across straight?
No, you would have to go to the third lane or the rightmost through lane. So that would be a change in operation.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thank you. So the next steps are you're going to take the proposal and incorporate the feedback that works and take it to the city council?
Yeah, we'd take it to city council, and if they direct us to move forward with a final final design plans for construction, and then again, if we were to go through the construction bidding process.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rupavar.
Thank you for addressing this intersection. It's a mess. I take this intersection every single day to and from work, as does my husband. So I really appreciate that. I had a few comments real quick. I am very glad to see that you've removed the bike lane in the preferred option. I think that would be a mistake. When you come off 101, that traffic shoots. Like, I get on it and people, it's late, you just want to get to where you want to get, so I don't see how having a bike lane there would help, so I'm really glad to see you took that off. To Commissioner Alczek's point about signalizing that second right turn lane, I would have to disagree again. That traffic there is so backed up during evening rush hour coming off the 101, it would just make it even worse than it is. One thing you might want to consider is that I understand that that second left turn lane is helpful or needed for morning commute hours, but in the evening when I come home, 101 traffic is mostly going straight. So is it possible to make that second left turn lane left or straight? That way, I mean, just something to think about. Would that help ease the evening commuter traffic that wants to go straight, and that's where you get the rush?
Actually, so you're talking about coming off the freeway, that left turn?
Yeah, I'm talking about coming off from your right-hand side 101,
Okay.
coming down San Antonio.
So I've actually observed the opposite with that left turn pocket. It's a single left turn pocket filling up and blocking the through lanes. And
Interesting.
And
that hasn't been my experience.
we wouldn't be able to have 3 through lanes because we only have 2 receiving lanes, and we wouldn't want to have a merge like in the middle of the intersection or right immediately after. So there's only 2 southbound lanes that continue. So.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think my other just point I should throw out, maybe you're going to disagree with me, but I rarely see bicyclists or pedestrians in that intersection. I'm just going to throw that out there. And I walk that intersection, and it's typically just me and my child's stroller. And I don't think I've ever seen a bicyclist. So want to throw that out there in terms of when we think about bike lanes. And it seems like that's consistent with what, based on your head nodding, or no, is that consistent with what you've seen? Or
I'm sorry,
no?
I was just going to say we have counts of it.
You do, so you see a lot more. Is it during, not during rush hour?
It's not a steady time
Okay.
that it occurs. It's the counts throughout the day that really justifies it.
Interesting. Yeah,
But
I was
it's also the
surprised.
concern that we've heard from people that are actually making those crossings, but we do have counts.
We do have bike and ped counts. The ped counts are in particularly higher during the AM and PM peak hours and also during the lunch hour. I think going to the different restaurants in the area.
The shopping center is
And the
down
shopping
towards
center.
the 101.
But I know like during the
Southbound?
kind of shoulder periods, it's a little bit lower, and we've heard both, the counts do show lower on the bikes, but we've also heard that it's because of the conditions. That
Interesting. Yeah,
they're
okay.
looking to get to either Leghorn or some other through the greenhouse development, and would want to, this would be the most direct route, but they're avoiding it just because of safety concerns.
I see.
Commissioner Suma.
Thank you. So it looks like you had a really good community process and people are happy with it. And I think like most of my colleagues, you always think bike lanes are good, but that kind of broken bike lane that went behind the cars pulling out on an angle looked like a death trap. So I don't think there's a good solution for a bike lane here. And I think given the limits of this specific project, I think that D has worked things out probably as well as they can be worked out. And that it will definitely be an improvement to have those crosswalks shortened and quicker for people. Because like when I see bikes and pedestrians at this intersection, it's really kind of daunting. It's not the easiest place for those kinds of modes of travel. So, and I agree, I think we need to keep 2 right turn lanes coming off of the highway because of the volume of traffic kind of there. So I'm very appreciative of staff's process, and I would be happy to recommend basically number D, letter D. Thank you.
Is that a motion?
Is that, you want to make a motion? I can make a motion.
Commissioner Wolfold, would you have any comments?
I really have nothing to add. I think that you did a great job pulling this together, and I support recommendation D.
I'll just say something to you then as well. I think it is really good work, but what I want to do is provide just a little more context. I think it highlights something that we're going to have to grapple with more. Particularly, we saw, a month and a half ago, a residential project come in this corridor, and what this project doesn't do is take a corridor-based approach here, and we kind of already talked about that. Elegant pedestrian solution that once we build will be a stranded asset, right? It'll be assuming we do take a bigger picture approach, we will need to revise it. And I think what I don't see this resolve is some of the multimodal movement that has to happen either on this corridor or in parallel to this corridor. And we talked a lot about this we probably talked too much about this in the pre-meeting. So I think I would basically, if you would just take to council, one of the things I think that we've talked about in other sessions is whether or not this needs to become a new district of sorts or a new area that does become a little more residentialized. And if that's the case, then to a certain degree, the character of this street needs to change. So I think that, and Commissioner Wolfold, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, what I would add to that is, I think that if and when that happens, we need to be open that, this is something that could change. But I think that this was teed up to us as a solution to a problem. And so, today I support a solution to a problem. But I agree with Chair Riggs that we do need to take on some planning in this district. And I hope that we can address all these issues when we do that.
Yeah, if I can, this area specifically, and I think this is a relevant discussion, this area is going to be most likely rapidly changing, and it's something that we're going to have to keep a really, close handle on. So I think it's a relevant discussion.
That's great, thank you. So Commissioner Suma, did you want to make a motion?
I'd like to move staff's recommendation on packet page 36, recommend City Council to review the preferred alternative concept plan for the San Antonio Road and East Charleston Road intersection and direct staff to complete final design plans, environmental analysis specifications and estimates for construction with, I think, a clear preference for letter D from the commission.
I'll second that.
Okay, I'm going to choose Commissioner Rupivar as that second, because it's a little bit of time. And Commissioner Wolfold, did I miss your light? Did you have another comment? Okay. Seeing no other discussion, we'll vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries 6-1. Commissioner Templeton opposing. Sorry, did you want to speak to your opposition, Commissioner Templeton?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned before, I think you've done great work, and this has come a long way since I saw it early on in the first 2 options. But I don't feel comfortable that we have solved the problem. This does look awkward, and I'm concerned about the changes may be confusing to current users, especially with not being able to go straight from that right turn lane into the gas station, things like that. We still have the long pedestrian cross times that may be difficult for youth and elderly people. So I want to just throw that out there, that if you can push it any further, I'm sure that those constituents would, and those residents would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Templeton. Okay, so items, thank you, staff, for being here. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, guys, for being here. That was really good. So item 6 is to consider and recommend downtown proposal for a new PDA and conservation areas. And before I hand it over to Director Late, Commissioner Tsuma.
Yes, I decided to recuse myself on this issue, and not because there's any specific legal or financial conflict, but my husband does work at a company that has 5 locations in the downtown area, and so just to avoid any appearance of any kind of conflict, I thought I'd just sit this one out. So thank you.
All right, Director Lay.
Great, thank you. So Hugh Hong is going to present this next item for you. I think, have you been for the PTC before? Okay. Okay, so shortly after she started working, she made a presentation. So this is her second debut.
Okay, so good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. I'm Hung Hoon. I'm a Senior Housing Planner. So tonight I'd like to propose on the priority development area and priority conservation areas in Palo Alto. So here's a presentation overview.
Please stay close to the mic.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. So I'm going to answer some question. What is Planned Bay Area? What is a priority development area, PDA, or a priority conservation area, and proposed locations for the PDA and PCAs, and the purpose and parameters of the designations. So what is Planned Bay Area? As required by SB 375, we're required to do a regional sustainable community strategy, and in that it's a long-range planning effort to incorporate transportation and land use to achieve reductions in greenhouse gas. And the regional agency that heads that for our region is APAC and MTC. So the update for Planned Bay Area is every 4 years, and the next update is in 2021. So with every update, MTC and APAC solicits for new PDA and PCAs, and to focus growth and conservation efforts in that new update. So what is a priority development area? It's an infill location near public transit to focus housing and job growth. So the idea is to have housing near public transit and jobs to reduce car dependency and reduce greenhouse gases. So what is a conservation area, priority conservation area? It's a land of regional significance that is facing pressure from urban growth and development, and we want to prioritize to conserve the area. So what is the purpose of designating a PDA and PCA? We want to align local priorities and regional strategies, and also inform regional housing needs allocation where housing sites are placed, and especially be eligible for future planning grants and other capital project grants that may be presented by OBAG or One Bay Area grant. So the parameters of designated PDA. So Planned Bay Area does not supersede any local land use authority or code. And there's no need to amend the comprehensive plan or code, and we don't need to adopt the Planned Bay Area. The city can, again, the designation of the PDA and PCA is completely voluntary. The city can undesignate at any point in time. The plan barrier process update is just started so the city can give input and modify it as needed. So currently the city has one PDA and it's in Cal Ave. That's within half mile of the Cal train station. About 118 acres, and the city have been awarded because it's an eligible PDA, about $750,000. So the proposed PDA that we have is in downtown near University Avenue. So the border in orange outlines the proposed PDA. So that includes the parking assessment area, SOFA, the University Avenue Caltrain station, and also down to Stanford Shopping Center. Also like to note that even though those are the boundaries, PDA funding can go beyond the half mile of the boundaries. So a priority conservation area that we are proposing is the wet baylands. We have already identified that we want to conserve the wetlands, so this is another way to reiterate the message that we want to conserve the area. Another area that we want to identify for conservation is the foothills. And so we identified the city-owned parcels in the city boundaries for the foothills. So staff recommends that you consider and give any recommendation to City Council of the staff proposal of new PDAs and PCAs.
Okay. Why don't we open it up for questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Templeton.
Hi, thank you. I am wondering about the downtown University Avenue area. How did you determine the edges?
Yeah. Okay.
Boundary.
Okay. So we outlined the parking assessment area and also the SOFA that has been identified as residential transitional near public transit. And we incorporate the public transit area and down to Stanford. And Stanford has been identified in the comp plan for housing, for development.
Thank you. I'm wondering specifically
and
what...
shopping center, sorry.
Pardon me?
The Stanford Shopping Center.
Yes, I got that side. The other side, kind of along the Alma side, it seems here and there, and I'm just wondering, is there any reason not to go all the way to Alma on that, or is it because there's housing there? Sorry. Or... I'm on packet page 51. So there's some little zigzags, and I'm just wondering
So I think, yeah,
what parts we cut out.
So as I understand it, the reason you see the shape that you see there is because it already reflects the district boundaries that we have for downtown and for
Predefined,
the
okay.
SOFA area.
Okay.
And that's why it has that.
Is there any reason not to go up to,
Well, I
is it,
guess
those are
the-
residences, I think, maybe some of them, or?
I guess the reason for not necessarily having to do that is because the principal reason that we're pursuing this exercise is so that we can be eligible for funding.
And some of that funding can go outside this boundary?
Within a
as you
half a
mentioned?
mile outside of the
Okay.
boundary. So I think we're covered even if it's not specifically delineated.
Good, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Alcheck.
Yeah, so I had sort of the same thought. I wondered the rationale for the odd shape of the PDA, wondered why it didn't, make its way down El Camino. I wondered why it didn't have a more circular representation. I also wanted to know, there's like municipal service center areas within the, what do you call it, the PCA? Yeah, there's some Palo Alto buildings in this designated area. What is the staff's interpretation of what would happen to that site?
So we just drew a general border around the Baylands. We know that there's some city parcels owned land in there, but that's part of the bidding. So we just sent a letter in interest to ABAC about the boundaries we are thinking about.
Yeah, so, and Hong will correct me if I'm wrong on this, but that we've included property that also includes the MSC and city-owned properties that may be utilized for public facility services, in no way compromises our interest, our local interest in our local zoning and policies by designating this a PCA. All it does is makes us eligible for possible funding to advance our interest in that area, and some things that come to mind in the Baylands is with sea level rise, there might be potentially some funding opportunities in the future to help us with our own projects. You saw one, I think, a year and a half ago about the bridge in the wetlands that was extended about 13 feet above median sea level. Presumably that could have been something that may have been eligible for some funding if we had this as a PCA.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just wanted to understand how that, I mean, look, when it comes to priority conservation, I mean, I would describe, this is going to sound like heresy, but I would describe the foothills as the definition of an infill site.
That's heresy.
And the notion that, you know, there's a green tract, you know, a mile from our city center, or 2.5 miles from our city center, and that's untouchable, but we're fine if we, you know, develop something that's 60 miles away from any, you know, civic area, is, from a conservation perspective, I think a little upside down. But it doesn't sound like this is going to add hurdles to development in the foothills, because you can't do that now. But I guess my question is would, what is does the funding opportunities that you suggested increase based on the amount of square acreage we identify? So does sort of finding every single pocket of PCA, for example, mean that there are technically more dollars available to our disposal should we need to invest them in sort of Baylands flood control or something? Is there some relationship there that you want to maximize the number of acres?
I'm not sure on the word.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's based on the square footage. I think it's a matter of where the project is and if it's within the project boundary area. Again, it also extends within a half mile beyond our project boundary. So if, you know, if the commission felt like we've over-defined the area, I mean, again, I don't.
No, I'm not suggesting that. Look, I don't know enough about Foothills Park, for example, to understand, for example, why the section of Quarry Lakes was eliminated. Like, to me, there's just some.
Yeah, so the green on that map represents city-owned property. The white is private.
Is private. You can't designate private land as a PCA?
You can, but you have to get permission from the owners.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't understand that. Okay, thank you for explaining that. Okay, that's all I have, I guess.
So Commissioner Walfolk, I have you next. I just want to ask a little more detailed question, if that's okay. I actually am curious about your GIS buffers here. I've seen this before, and it just struck me that there's two buffers that are overlapping one another with the downtown PDA. I'm assuming these buffers actually go from two centroids, because it wouldn't make sense that this half-mile buffer is bigger than the other half-mile buffer. What's going on with this buffer being huge and the other buffer not being huge?
You know, Hong again will correct me, but is this based on the Caltrain station? Yeah, so
but why wouldn't you? Then this is not accurate.
Well, but the platform extends. So we have.
But you would take a.
I'm
So
sorry.
you're saying that it's a half mile okay, I don't know the code well enough either, if it's at a half mile from the centroid or a half mile from the thing, but so, I mean, I don't.
I think it's a fair question, and one that we've
Because to be honest, the centroid approach necessarily doesn't match up to parcels. And so this could, particularly if you're right on the right on the edge of a parcel, for example, right here on El Camino, I guess my concern is we don't know what falls in and what falls out from a parcel basis based on this. All we know is that there's this generalized buffer. And so what I would, it could be that we need to think about the PDA differently to represent the parcels that are within the half-mile buffer as opposed to this artificial, as opposed to the kind of the jagular orange line. It just seems to me that this is, sorry, I just made up a word. Sorry. I said jagular. Jagged. This jagged line here, it's relative based on what you all are, what I understand the policy to be. And so I guess what I'm saying is that because this other buffer is not parcel-based, it's only based on the centroid parcel, the Caltrain station. Centroid is a real word. Then it has the propensity to potentially overlook properties at the edges.
Okay, so not disagreeing with you, just want to add a couple of clarifying points. It's not so Caltrain has a right-of-way, and there's a parcel that's been identified with that. That includes the station, the platform, some of the parking lots, and so we take a look at that whole area, and we've drawn our buffer around that area. Yes, around the property.
That's not going to be captured in the minutes. It's a oblong rectangular parcel that you did, and that's why it's this shape. That makes sense to me.
Great.
But what it does is it actually causes this ripple effect question along the edge, so none of the other border of the buffer represent anything else under the ground, on the ground. It doesn't represent parcels at all, right? So I think that's just a little bit of a conflict point.
I just don't understand that. I don't understand that point. What's not represented?
If I was a developer and I wanted to assemble some parcels and one of them happened to be on a Camino and it was in the kind of the half-mile buffer and one of them wasn't, does that mean I'm not in the PDA and my project doesn't apply?
I just want to clarify that the PDA doesn't change anything in our code or comprehensive
I know that,
plan,
but it's
usually what we apply for funding for PDA, it's for a project base, and I don't think the buffer question mattered, but.
Yeah, I don't know what this, I mean, on that one-off situation where you're on that edge, that would apply no matter where we draw the lines on it, but I think there probably are some rules about how much percentage of the property is within the PDA and outside of it. If it's contiguously owned, there may be some rules on that. But I mean, that would apply regardless of how we draw the radius. You're always going to have an edge case somewhere.
Well, then why wouldn't it just be I don't understand the approach where you just didn't use the buffer to select the underlying parcels.
You want us to specifically select the underlying parcel?
Yeah.
Because this map doesn't get down to that level, right? Is that what you're saying?
I'm assuming that the entire orange line is based on parcels that have been selected to draw that line.
So that's based on existing boundaries that are set forth in our zoning code and our comp plan for the downtown core, the SOFA district, that orange kind of
that are based,
jagular,
well, okay.
what is it?
It just seems backwards to me in terms of fair enough. If you think it works, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Walfogel, and we're just going to end this conversation.
What I think it does, just quickly, is it reflects the pattern of development that we see where there's a lot more commercial development, and where that's separated by some of the residential or transition areas.
Well, I think, just to kill off the conversation, my concern is it's representative of where you see the development occurring, but that may not be where the market is dictating the development is wanting to occur, and so it does invite this propensity for a disconnect. And, one of the things that you weren't on the prep call, but we talked a little bit about, well, why isn't this drawn on both sides of El Camino? The entire swath of El Camino. Why is El Camino not a high-capacity transit corridor? Right. We've talked about this for years, and I think it should be. But
So 2 points. One, just to make sure that we're on the same page on this Jagular piece. It's a half mile past that too, right? So it's not just this orange boundary, it's a half mile plus.
I know.
Okay, all right. And then as far as El Camino, we talked about that at a staff level as well. And we debated that. We were trying to figure out, do we want to submit information to apply a PDA along El Camino, and do we want to do one around portions of San Antonio? Were there other areas of the city that we thought might be appropriate for this? And in the end, we just thought that we should just go with the one downtown area, because within the next 4 years, that's probably the one that's most likely to see some attention. This group has talked about a need for planning along El Camino. We certainly agree with you on that. I don't know that that's in the next 4-year horizon, and by the time this comes around again, we thought maybe we could explore extending a PDA along El Camino. That was our reasoning. I don't know if it's too late for us to apply along El Camino if the council wanted to do so.
No, we're still able to modify and add additional PDAs.
So if it was the commission's recommendation that, hey, this is great, but go further, we'd like to see, some areas along El Camino, then that's an option for you to consider as well.
I would totally support that, but I'm not going to thwart this, and I'm going to follow my support for that. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Wolf, because I know he has some opinions on this as well.
I guess I won't talk about ovoids. Just a couple of, sorry. Thank you. I'm sure that was meant as a compliment. Couple of questions, and by the way, thanks for the presentation. Could you say something about what the $750K CalEV PDA award was? I'd just like to understand what we get for designating an area a PDA.
So the funding can be used for various items, so be used for planning grants or anything to plan for the area, to street improvements, to other transportation improvements around the area.
But it's for planning, is it for capital projects as well, or what's the, could we put in a proposal for $10 million for subsidizing affordable housing units or something like that? I just want to understand what the scope of PDA is.
I think it's pretty broad. I think you could apply for capital projects. I think housing was spoken about, but I don't think it's a grant yet, but it's not, we haven't received. I think the next grant funding cycle will be in 2021 or 22, but it's not completely sure that housing is out the question for capital projects. I'm unsure about that, but I could get back to you with a more
Yeah, I think
concrete
that
answer.
would be helpful. And also, what's the timing for submitting the application? When?
Yeah, so we have to go to council in December and pass, the council has to adopt a resolution and also get approval from city council to submit by January 16, 2020.
Okay. One final question, and then I have a couple of comments. And this is relative to the PCA. And it's just another technical question. Do we need to coordinate with the county ALUC about airport use, about including the airport in the PDA, in the PCA?
So I think if we were doing any development as a result of funding that we received, we would absolutely need to do that coordination. The designation itself doesn't require communication because the designation doesn't do anything. It doesn't supersede our local zoning. It doesn't convey any other changes to our local policies in any way.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that, and now let me tell you my concerns, and I'm actually very inclined to support the PCA, of course, subject to this, that it doesn't interfere with any of the current uses in those PCA districts, the municipal uses, the airport uses. In the PDA, I'm not sure that I know enough to support it today, and the reason for that, I'll just tell you my reasons. I've spent 4 years on this commission where a big theme has been encouraging residential development, housing development in the downtown district. We've implemented generous density bonuses. I think we've tried really hard, and we've gotten no takers so far. And I'm not sure we understand why we've gotten no takers so far. I think it's a great empirical question, and it'd be great to answer that at some point. And then to Chair Riggs's point, I think there are other districts, El Camino, the San Antonio corridor, where the market seems to want to develop housing, and we're lagging behind. I mean, we are several years behind even a process to develop a plan for those districts. I mean, we're going through an NVCAP process where the biggest parcel owner, is somewhat unenthusiastic about a change in use. So, I mean, I'm not sure that we're spending our money smartly if our goal is to get housing development. And then my second concern about this is that I don't completely trust the state as a partner in some of these processes. I'm a little concerned that if we designate PDAs, that they'll come back 5 years in the future and possibly penalize us in some fashion for not accomplishing something in a PDA. I mean, it doesn't appear to be their intent today, but we've seen this movie before. I mean, when they agreed to spend $10 billion on Caltrain electrification, they didn't attach conditions to that $10 billion at the time that they authorized it. But 10 years later, they do want to attach conditions to it. And so I think we should actually be very cautious unless you can say, look, there's a substantial amount of money. There are projects that are likely to get entitled that won't get entitled without some analysis, without some access to capital. But otherwise, I just feel like this is another one of these processes where I'm not sure that I see positive outcomes, and I'm just worried about that.
Commissioner Lawing and then Commissioner Rubavar.
Okay, I actually had similar concerns that Commissioner Waldfeld had, but I'm coming at it from maybe a different starting point. On page 49, in red, you've got published that note, which I want to make sure I understand. This Plan Bay Area does not supersede land use authority to cities, which means us, and it doesn't require the city land use policies to be consistent with Plan Bay Area. So you're saying that we're a city, so we can override things if we choose to?
Yeah, yes.
Right, okay. So the bigger question, which I think is partially what Commissioner Waldford was getting at, is what about state law? Because it seems like state law can still come in and override anything we do, correct?
So as we've seen with some, recent legislation from the state, I mean, they've exercised their police powers to make changes to our local zoning,
right,
regardless of a PDA.
Right. So I just want to get that clarified for the hearing here, because the red lines sound glorious, but we can't do anything if the state doesn't allow us to do stuff within that particular corridor. So, but I just want to clarify that. That's not a question. However, the whole objective of the PDA here is for future housing and job growth, and I'm addressing Commissioner Walfogel's comments directly, and the planning director has said this will provide potential new funding. So if there's new funding that could be coupled with private development funding, maybe that's actually a way to incent more development in a way that we haven't done before. So, and on the downside, there is none, because all we're doing is recognizing the proximity to transportation that we already have with the downtown corridor. So I'd be comfortable with how it's written. With respect to the natural areas, I certainly hope the barriers continue to remain very high to building houses in Foothills Park. But in terms of putting designating those, I think is sort of a no-brainer, because we generally have so far in Palo Alto. So I'm comfortable supporting both of the design districts.
Commissioner Olczyk, did you have another comment?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I think that the concept of the PDA is a component of I would suggest that I'm more optimistic that the PDA can create sort of a fruitful outcome if it is implemented in conjunction with an effort by our city council to begin to address the largest hurdles to development of housing. I think one of the biggest constraints that I really feel the broader public doesn't appreciate is that the parcel size in this zone, like in our downtown where we're so enthusiastically attempting to encourage the development of housing, is literally too small to create that housing under our height constraints. So I think if you were to adopt this sort of initiative, I think you would see results as our community begins to lower the restrictions and the barriers. And I think that's coming. And I think that, I think initiatives like that, designations like this and they have the propensity to essentially create an opportunity so that once those thresholds are lowered, then the development will come in and it'll be even more supported in this I think in this area. So I don't know. I would not suggest that that we shouldn't think optimistically about whether or not this will help. I think it will help. I think it doesn't eliminate the first hurdle. And so this will address the other hurdles that are sort of not the initial hurdle to development of housing in this area. And so as soon as we lower that hurdle, once we eliminate that hurdle, then this will address some of the hurdles that come after it. And so, I would support this. Obviously, I would absolutely support a motion. I won't make it though, because I just don't know that there's really enough support for it, but I would support a motion, or I would recommend that council just think about expanding this, because I guess my response to our director's comment was, look, I get it. You think this is the area, so why don't we start here? It doesn't seem like I guess my question is, did staff identify the other areas like San Antonio and other parts of El Camino as problematic if we added them? Or do we just want to get comfortable with them? I think in large part, every time we do something in this community and nothing happens, it makes the case that the hurdles that we keep ignoring are actually the hurdles we need to address. So I think expanding this boundary is a good idea, because if in 2 years or in 5 years we're still at 0 units developed, then we can say, okay, that's not working, let's try again. And so I would support a motion that would encourage council to adopt a larger boundary for the PDA on
And
this.
just to clarify, those questions were rhetorical, right? Those weren't.
Well, no, I would. I would like to know if my interpretation of your comments is true. That it's not that you found it problematic to expand the boundary to San Antonio. You just, I understood it as you were gun shy. Is that accurate? Was there a reason?
Well, I think that, to put it in politer terms, you were building on precedent.
I think that in our conversation, we focused on where do we think is the most likely opportunities for future growth. And for the PDA, for the PCA, I think we had that sort of understood. But you're right. I mean, I think that there's a level of tolerance that we were trying to contemplate as part of a reasoned recommendation to move forward. And the comments that we heard from Commissioner Waldfogel were ones that we were mindful of, and as expressed by Commissioner Lowing. I do think that there's a sentiment that if we adopt, a PCA, what does that mean? And there might be some doubt about by some members of the community about whether it's worth pursuing this. And from a staff perspective, we think it is worth pursuing it because as we understand it, there's funding available. We don't want to lose any opportunity for funding, particularly in the downtown area where we're talking about grade separation or a possible downtown coordinated area plan when we finish the NVCAP. And so for us, it was just more of a measured reasoning as opposed to, being gun shy about wanting to do the rest of the city.
Look, I get it.
El Camino, I mean.
I think that's reasoned. I think that's appropriate for the, approach for this community. But I just want to acknowledge that the only developments that we've seen for housing in the last half decade, right, is at the corner of Page Mill and El Camino, which that one's maybe in jeopardy, I have no idea. And then the one we just looked at tonight, right, which is on El Camino and what is that, East Meadow? So, the housing, Billy made that point that where the market thinks the housing is going to go and where we think the housing can go are sort of two different things. And I'm not suggesting that we don't proceed cautiously and listen to the feedback. I'm just suggesting that the source of the feedback has to also be the marketplace and has to also be the broader, we have to also appreciate the broader, I would suggest I would suggest this, there's a growing dissatisfaction in our community with the rate of development. And I think that voice is going to get louder and louder. And as a member of this commission, I would support broadening that zone. That's it.
All right. Commissioner Wolfel, did you have additional comment?
Yeah, just what I'll add to this is, I think we've heard pretty clearly that this doesn't do anything to reduce hurdles. So arguing that this reduces hurdles is not supported by the staff report. I think that we need to get smarter about what the Pareto front looks like. We should do the things that make a difference first, and then come later to the smaller things that will help. I wish we knew what kind of funding we could access from this. I mean, if staff were saying, this is a chance to get $1 million of grants or $10 million of grants or capital projects or something, I could get a whole lot more enthusiastic because I could see the upside. But as it is, what I see is risk, and I'm not really hearing enough information about the upside.
So just on that one point, so it's not where we come up with a project and we ask for the money. It's a funding opportunity is presented, and usually they're trying to tie transportation and housing and jobs together. And so from time to time, grant opportunities become available, and we look to see, do we have a project that is consistent with that or not? SB 2 was a grant funding opportunity recently that we applied for because we wanted to do some more work on ADUs, so that was something that we knew. There's been some other grant opportunities that we've applied for because the council's direction has given us enough sort of guidance to say what's being proposed is in line with the policy interests of the city. And so we've made ourselves available. It does not exclude capital projects or planning studies or any other type of projects where there is funding available that and where those projects are within this boundary are opportunities where we would just be able to apply for those opportunities.
And I think you made a comment, I think you made a comment that the boundaries are not really cast in concrete, that projects that are near the boundary or outside the boundary are also eligible. So, I mean, what does that mean relative to these other districts? So if we had a project on El Camino, would we be able to apply for it on the basis that we already have a PDA on Cal Ave, or how does that work?
Yeah, it would just have to be within a half mile. So within a half-mile radius of the boundary that we're selecting. So that we have a PDA in the city is not enough, but if there was a project site within a half mile of our project boundary, whether it's in Cal Ave or the proposed one in downtown, then it would be a qualifying site.
Yeah. So what I would say is if we can make ourselves comfortable that this won't commit us to other downstream obligations, and there are opportunities that are market-driven. I mean, to both Chair Riggs and Vice Chair Olczyk's points, the marketplace seems to want to develop housing in places different from where we've targeted in our comp plan work. And I think that will persist because I think that just the economics of housing versus the economics of other uses in the downtown district dictate that it'll be hard to get housing projects developed there, for probably a long time in the future. So if we're really focused on that, I just feel like we're proposing to do something here that doesn't directly attack any of our goals and indirectly may harm us. And I'd like to be a lot more confident that it won't harm us before I could push it forward.
Commissioner Templeton.
Hi, thank you. I intend to make a motion, but I have a question first. Do we know if there are parts of San Antonio Road that are within half a mile radius of the San Antonio train station that's in Mountain View?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say something before the planning director responds. But the agendized item is consideration of a PDA for the downtown, as well as PCAs for Foothill and Baylands. It's not agendized as a general discussion about all of the various areas where we might have PDAs in Palo Alto, including the San Antonio area. We've had some limited discussion about San Antonio, and I heard that in the context of trying to determine how the downtown was selected, because there are some various other areas. But the motion should not go to areas other than the items that have been agendized for the commission's discussion.
So if we wanted to recommend anything other than what's written here, we cannot?
It has not been agendized. The public is not.
So the discussion of it, okay.
Yes,
public.
yes.
That's not what I heard from staff.
It's not, yeah.
And
It's unclear,
I
sorry.
think that there's been a number of people that it suggested that the PDA should be expanded.
Yes,
That
so.
the downtown PDA should be expanded.
Yes, so if the downtown boundaries could be expanded. So if you're talking about a downtown PDA, that's one thing, whether it's these boundaries or a larger boundary. But if you're talking about San Antonio, which is not in the downtown, that's a separate matter. Now, what I heard staff say in response to questions was that the council could consider other PDAs, but that is not agendized for the commission's discussion.
Thank you so much for clarifying. So we're not able to make a recommendation to council that they consider other areas?
Why don't you make that a separate motion?
Would that work?
I think you could generally say that they might consider PDAs in other areas.
Okay, all right. Then I move staff's recommendation that the downtown, we have the PDA in downtown and PCAs in Foothills and Baylands, and that council may consider other areas. No, I don't. I don't accept that. Do you have a second? If not, then you second it.
There was a second. I think there was an informal. Just for the record, there was an informal request to do it in two motions, and that request was denied by the motion maker. Questions or comments, discussion, motion on the floor?
Excuse me, sorry, Mr. Chair. Can I just, so if there's two divisible propositions and a motion, the commission's procedural rules say that upon request of a commissioner, the presiding officer shall divide the question.
Then let's do it. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Asher.
But are these presented as divisible in the staff report?
I think they are divisible propositions.
All right, okay.
Yes.
All right, could you like to rephrase
Yes,
your motion?
I will divide the motions then per Commissioner Waldfogel's request, and we can do the downtown PDA first. So,
Commissioner Alcheck, does your second still stand?
Yeah, I second.
And this does not include, just for clarification, we're taking out the PCA?
Yeah. Can I just ask a clarifying question to the maker?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would just say that the suggestion that the boundaries be increased is made based on not having any evidence to why they shouldn't be. Like, I think we've had sort of an absence of information here, because
I'd like to request to.
Are we making like
I'd like to amend. I would like to amend the motion to suggest to council that the downtown PDA be extended along El Camino, the length of El Camino.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to clarify from the motion maker. We're making a recommendation to consider extending the boundary, or are you making, sorry, let me rephrase my question. My question is, are we suggesting that council consider expanding the boundary of this downtown PDA, or is your motion to recommend this PDA and consider alternative areas also for other PDAs, non-specific? That's all I wanted to know. And if it's expanded, maybe we could get a little more specific.
I was moving the staff recommendation, and I believe that Chair Riggs had an amendment.
Oh, I thought I heard you say something about it.
I think that, just to provide some clarity between the two of you, the original motion was general. Prior to your question, I would like to suggest an amendment. I would encourage, it does not change the original motion, but what it does is I'd like to request that council consider extending the downtown PDA along the spine of El Camino.
I accept that amendment. How about you, Mike?
Silent about other PDAs.
And I would say that and that council consider other locations for priority development area.
Okay, I just needed to know that. Thank you.
It's additive to the original motion.
Can we just get clarity on the geography? El Camino is very long.
I would leave it to staff because I think it has to be within a I can't do the half-mile math on the fly here.
Oh, is that the only constraint? That's fine.
I think it has to be constrained based on a half mile, if I'm not mistaken. So what it would do, I mean, the way I envision it, the way I envision from a geospatial standpoint, from what I described, it would be radials alongside El Camino. I'm seeing it as a parcel-based radius along El Camino for the extent of that circular buffer. Do you understand what I'm saying? A new jagular line. So we have a motion on the table. Any discussion or additional questions on the motion on the floor? With all that, I think we'll vote. All in favor of the motion on the floor? Opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-1. Commissioner Templeton, would you like to make a second motion?
Yes, I would like to move.
I'm sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry, speak to the dissent. Apologies. Thank you for the reminder. Appreciate that. Commissioner Waldvogel.
Thank you. This may be a great idea. We just don't have enough information tonight to assess if it's a great idea. We don't really know what the upside is, and we certainly don't know what the downside is. I think if we had more information, I could be persuaded to support it and also to support bigger district boundaries. But just on what we know tonight, I'm not ready.
Thank you, Commissioner Beaufort. Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you. I move the staff recommendation for new priority conservation areas in foothills and baylands.
Second.
Commissioner Long, second. Okay. Discussion, comments? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0. Excellent. That is the conclusion of our formal agenda. We have approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move.
That is a movement by Commissioner Rupavard. I need a second.
Do you guys have minutes?
I think we did. No, they're not in the packet. Never mind, we don't have, well, strike that. Strike that, it's late for me. I don't believe, any other items, Commissioner questions, announcements, staff announcements? We probably would like maybe a look ahead, future items as well. Sure.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned the future items before with the in lieu coming up. We have a couple other things. I was wondering about the commission usually do a retreat in the January, February area. I didn't know if the commission had that conversation recently.
We did talk with Rachel about that, and we need to make sure that the commission appointment, we want to make sure the commission appointments have been made before we hold that retreat.
Understood.
So it probably will be January, early February before we do that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, we don't think that the appointments will be made prior to January 30th. Commissioner Templeton.
Hi, just wanted to do a brief update on the XCAP, the Railroad Grade Crossing Committee. They conducted a community meeting last week, and it was well attended and got a lot of good feedback. We also heard tonight that new proposals can be presented to the XCAP if you had ideas or alterations to the ideas that we're considering, and we will evaluate them and determine whether to forward them to council or not. So keep that in mind if you have strong opinions on how those grade crossings should be designed. Please, we welcome your input. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We really appreciate you doing that, Carrie. Commissioner Olczyk.
I was hoping maybe you could help us understand the council action related to overnight parking of RVs, and was something accomplished that?
So the city council is not taking this issue up yet. We did go to the Policy and Services meeting yesterday. I think it was Tuesday.
Got it. Is it coming before council?
It will be presented to the council, I think, in the January, February timeframe, and it's a pilot program dealing with private property, church or religious institution lots, and we'll develop some parameters to process that.
Thanks.
All right, so I have 3 questions for you. Would like 3 updates. Castellea, where is it? When are we gonna see it again? Can I just list them? Coverly, I hear the school board doesn't want to do housing on Coverly. Does that preclude city housing? What's up with the Coverly process? And then 3, what's the timeline, and is there a way to accelerate the timeline for some of that? For example, the EIR process for that housing project that came through on San Antonio. We guys had some, that was one of the few housing projects we've seen. What's the timeline for that project?
So for Castellea, we're still in the process of noting all of the comments and developing responses to those. So it's right now our consultant is doing sort of the work that they need to do to respond to those the public comments that we've received. That's the gym in the police. The thumping that you're hearing. It's the weights, free weights. So, we're still waiting for that feedback before we decide on, we need to get the information, be able to respond to how the public's comments may influence the project. Regarding the Coverly
so that's like 2020? Definitely spring 2020, is it? Timeline.
We'll have our comments by then.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly. I think we're, probably close to wrapping it up, but, it's a process that is driven in in part by the process that we have, but also the applicant, I think, is also contemplating the comments that have been received as well. And so they may have some things that they want to talk to us about too. The Coverly Master Plan, I think the draft concept plan was released recently, so I'll make sure that the commission gets copies of that. I think it was within the last couple of days. I think I saw an email about that, so we can forward that on to you. I don't have specific information about the school district. I know I've read what you've read, but I don't have any other insight into that.
Yeah, because I remember how they were drawing the property lines in a jagged manner.
Jagular.
And I just wonder if that precluded the uses that would be retained by the city. But I think we had asked to see that project again at some point. So that it sounds like that would be also a 2020 item, but
yeah, so
there was a lot of interest on the commission in that project.
Great, and I'll reach out to the staff that is working on that in the community services department and see how we can coordinate another feedback into the PTC on that. And then your last comment was about the San Antonio project. There is no way to fast track the environmental review. We have to do what we need to do relative to the historic resource there. I think it's pretty narrow what we're looking at. It's actually, as far as EIR processes go, I don't think that's going to be a particularly long one. And we hope to have that project going through the review cycle quickly. We understand the commission's interest in wanting to see another housing project, and we're right there with you to move that forward.
Thanks, I appreciate all this. Anything else? Anything else? Okay, you got.
Yeah, I just have
You got Commissioner Rupafar.
It's something to tell you guys. I noticed that we discussed sea level rise tonight. There is a panel at the Real Symposium in Stanford. I would encourage you to go. That's an academic discussion on sea level rise, how it's going to impact the Bay Area properties, which ones are going to be underwater, and how it's going to look like. It's true, apparently, like a lot of property that SFO, Mountain View, Palo Alto, a lot of it's going to be underwater, and the ramifications it's going to have from an insurance standpoint, from a real estate standpoint, litigation. I'm moderating the panel. That's all I'm encouraging. I know nothing about the topic, but thought you guys would be interested.
You should definitely go. All right. On that note, thank you. It is 8:54, and we are adjourned.